Shout out to Chargers Unleashed, Sebastian Joseph Day. You know the vibes. We outside.
You're listening to the Chargers Unleashed podcast with your host, Dan Wolkenstein and Jake Hefner.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. Today's show, of course, is being brought to you by BUSR, Charger Bull Family, Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You could also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein. You know, you wake up this morning, and it's just a different feeling. You know, we have our days when we wake up in April when it's the draft and everything like that, but it's a different type of feeling when you know that actual football is being played this evening. And I don't care if it's the Chargers or anything like that. I know we got that on Sunday, but the beginning of the NFL regular season, it gives you a different type of feeling to know what you're looking forward to from now until the beginning of February. And it's a damn good feeling. Week 1 is finally here.
It feels good. Week 1 is here. Chargers football just a mere 3 days away. Cannot wait. Week 1 versus the Raiders. What better way to kick off a season than going up against the team that bounced you out of the playoffs or being able to go to the playoffs. Week 18, heartbreaking fashion. Jake, exciting times. Today we got the Bills and the Rams, which is going to be a great game. Can't wait. But look, no one here is for that. We're all here for talking about the Chargers versus the Raiders. Week 1, storylines galore, box office, playmakers, closers, you name it. This one's going to be spicy.
Yeah, a lot to break down in this game, Dan. We said this a week ago when you were asking for like the early line projections as far as where it was sitting. At that point in time, the Chargers were a 3.5-point favorite. I don't know what it's going to be by the time game time rolls around. And I said that at that point in time that the Chargers would win by a touchdown. It's going to be closer. I'm sorry to say. It's going to be closer. It's going to be closer. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, Jake, where shall we start? Over or under, how many electric guitar celebrations we're going to see
from Austin Eckler?
From Austin Eckler on Sunday. I'm going to go with the line at 1.5.
I'm going to go under. I'm going to say he gets one. I'm going to say he gets one. But it is going to be from a throw. That's how he's going to get it. It's not going to be from a run. It's going to be from a throw. They're going to get him out in space, open up that screen game a little bit, and he's going to get in that way. So that's the little caveat that I'll put on that bet. But on that factor, obviously, let's play the Bills before we get into all the breakdowns. Let's talk about our sponsors over at BUSR, one of the newest and largest growing sports and race books that is out there right now. In terms of betting needs in the world of sports, couldn't get any better than what it is right now with college football beginning and obviously the NFL kickoff weekend starting tonight. So if you are a new member, go on over to BUSR. Sign up anywhere from your initial deposit for $100 to $1,000. They will actually match for any new customers coming in right now. Use the promo code Unleashed. Tell them Chargers Unleashed sent you, and go win yourself some money.
Make it rain with free money. Anyone who's a sports bettor who isn't taking advantage of this, I don't know what you're doing with your money, but it should be spent on this. If you're doing it, BUSR, go check them out. Jake, Chargers, Raiders, week 1. I don't think either fan base is hyped for this one even a little bit. We're all just ready for week 2.
No, it's going to be pretty fucking boring, actually, as a matter of fact. You know, what are we even talking about this game for? I don't think, yawn, pretty much the ho-hum game of the week. Shouldn't even be on national television. Womp
womp. Yeah.
Might as well just go ahead and black it out and give me the Dallas Cowboys and Tampa Bay game, even though it doesn't even start at the same time. You might as well actually just show me the replay of the Dallas Tampa Bay game from last season in place of the Chargers time slot.
Cool. Okay.
Very insignificant. So I'm glad that we're here
for Chargers Unleashed, for Jake Hefner, for Dan. No, Jake. I mean, there are so many storylines in this game. Before we get into kind of like the offense, defensive breakdowns, like just thinking about the game as a whole and thinking about like what the Chargers team, and to be honest, the Raiders team as well. Like, they look entirely different. Both teams have added some superstars. I would argue the Chargers have added more of them. But for folks who are saying, like, oh, this is a rematch from Week 18, and they'll use statistics and use plays and stuff based on that Week 18 game, Brandon Staley talked about it. Like, it is a completely different team, completely different season. And this Chargers defense, like, is literally like more different than the same. You've got arguably like 6 new starters on defense, and their weaknesses that they had a year ago are no more, or at least seemingly from what we've seen in preseason and the transactions they've had. The Raiders offense, I believe, has gotten better. I can't say the same about their defense aside from Chandler Jones, but there's lots of other suspect areas there. But I think, honestly, this game is less about X's and O's, in my opinion, kind of leading up to it. And it's more about just like who wants this thing more. Like, both teams have circled this matchup since jump. And there's going to be emotions flying, not only on the field, but in the stands too. Like, that stadium is going to be bonkers on Sunday. And that's what you're here for. Arguably the best matchup of the entire Week 1 slate is going to be at SoFi.
This is kind of the genius that Roger Goodell was thinking about when he got together with the schedule makers years ago to basically start off a majority of games divisionally and end them divisionally for a lot of individual teams. And how many times have we at the Chargers over the last 20 years opened against the Raiders, even before this whole scheduling switch actually started? These are the type of games that get you amped up. And Dan, it's different from the Chargers standpoint because not only do they have one, they have 2. And they have 2 divisional games within a 5-day span of one another. That's just nuts. And in a division that is, no question, the toughest division in the NFL right now, you can't afford to fall behind early. You can't do it. So there is a lot riding on the line for the Los Angeles Chargers in this game. I mean, I haven't even gotten to the salt of Week 18 of last year yet. I'm not even talking about the chip on the shoulder. I'm simply talking about this season starting off. But you know the players on the opposite sideline are just as amped to go up against us as we are with them. It's going to be a dogfight, Dan. It's yes, to your whole breakdown of it's the same type of game or it's different for these reasons. It's still going to be competitive. It's still an AFC West divisional game. And these games are always played tough. And regardless whether we're talking win or loss records here, when was the last time that you saw a truly one-sided game, regardless of who came out on top between these two?
Even last year's 28-14 was
it's
not.
Been a minute. It's been a minute since this has happened. So I don't anticipate a blowout in this one. Say what you will about the Chargers offense and the pieces that they have added to it. Say what you will about the Raiders offense and the pieces that they've added to it. I just don't see this being a blowout game. I see another highly competitive game taking place here. And yeah, the hype is palpable. You can taste it.
It is. And I think as we kind of go into it, before getting into kind of like offense versus defense, I think it's pretty remarkable, Jake, how many marquee matchups there are in this game to watch for on both sides. And you think about, like, there's so many times in which you say, oh, this team has all the advantages here, all the advantages there. And you look at just like the superstars that we're going to be seeing on Sunday go up against each other, and oftentimes one-on-one, like in isolation. So think about like the Max Crosby, Chandler Jones versus Rashawn Slater.
That's a prime focus.
Think about the possibility of, like, Derwin James, Darren Waller. Think about Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa go up against the left and right tackles, which that's a little bit of an advantage on the Chargers side. Think about the potential of, like, if JC Jackson plays and seeing him go up against Devontae Adams. There's so many. Look at the interior defensive line for the Chargers now going up against the Raiders offensive line that 3 of the 5 guys I think they're all new. I don't know how that's going to bode, but the amount of just sheer talent going up against each other. Bryce Callahan versus Hunter Renfrow. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I don't necessarily, we didn't even talk about Justin Herbert or Derek Carr. Like, obviously, they don't go up against each other, but like, there's also that lens. Talk about going up against coaches, right? Brandon Staley's year 2, Josh McDaniel stint 2, year 1 of his coaching staff tenure. Like, there's so many juicy matchups, and for me, I think the Chargers in the past have had a handful of superstars, but it just feels that this team has kind of exploded that number a bit to where it feels they're a lot less top heavy and top reliant than they used to be. And for how good the Raiders have gotten and how good the Chargers have gotten, I just don't think the Raiders have gotten as good as the Chargers. And hey, what do I know? The Chargers lost to the Raiders week 18. So they can talk all they want. But I think if you asked almost every pundit, they will tell you that the Chargers have the better team.
I mean, I don't refute that because I've heard plenty of people saying those very words, Dan. The only thing that I would unfortunately come back over the top with is like, well, shit, we've heard about how talented this team has been for years.
Yes.
We talked about it on the crossover with Dan Wade. It's like we are sick and tired of the narrative of on paper as it relates to the Chargers. Don't want to hear that anymore. So, yeah, it looks good. What we've seen in camp looks good. The matchups are tasty. They look good. But you got to come out and deliver, and you got to do it now.
And I think that's what I mean by, like, I think it's a lot, like, you know, throw out all of the X's and O's. Like, I think there's obviously, like, it's going to boil down to execution. It's going to come down to, like, which team has players that can win their matchups.
Yes.
Like, point blank. And, you know, I this is not me being the homer, but I'm genuine when I say this. Like, if you look at the matchups individually on both sides of the ball, how many do the Raiders have the advantage?
There's an argument that could be made that they have the wide receiver advantage.
Sure,
and I get that. And that totally makes sense.
It's an argument.
Yes.
Okay. That's one.
There's an argument that maybe you could say that they have it maybe as it relates to the run game, because that's been a little bit more established. You look at week 18 last year, what Josh Jacobs did in the final game, went over 100 yards rushing. That was ultimately the backbreaker of your defense. That's one matchup, obviously, that I am looking forward to basically say, have you cinched that whole third down defense up? But that's really it. Defensively in the secondary, no. I think the Chargers have that advantage there. I think you could say along the interior of the defensive line that the Chargers are slightly better. Pass rush, depending on where you think that Chandler Jones is in his career, I kind of think it's a little bit of a wash because we haven't seen Khalil Mack with this defense yet, nor have we seen Chandler Jones with the Raiders defense yet. We know what Max Crosby and Joey Bosa bring to the table. So I get what you're saying, Dan.
But I think I more mean not necessarily like our running game versus their running game. I mean like how they match up. So like their running game versus our interior defensive line. Their receivers are secondary. Their quarterback are, I don't know, secondary edge rushers, you name it.
Sure.
They're the only one that I think could be a victory in that would be Raiders receiving core, Chargers secondary. And even that, like if we're at full strength and you got Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Adams versus JC Jackson, let's put Derwin James in there with Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, those three versus, I would think it's probably, if it was those three, I would think Bryce Callahan, JC Jackson, Derwin James. If you want to sprinkle in there Asante or Mike Davis, I'm not sure.
Just to touch on, Daniel Popper just tweeted, JC Jackson once again did not practice today, nor did Donald Parham. So nothing for sure, but just putting that out there that is a second consecutive day of JC Jackson not practicing yet, but we'll see where we're at by the end of this week.
But is running around without a boot.
Yes.
So if the Chargers lose, it's not because of the less talented team. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
No, I wouldn't say that. It's execution. They've lost plenty of times when they are the more talented team. So yeah, execution is the X factor in this. So I would assume, given that you that you start off against the team that you lost to end the season last year, I would assume that Brandon Staley would have this team ready to go. If we're talking X factors here, Dan, again, say what you will about Josh McDaniels' previous coaching stint with the Denver Broncos. Obviously, he nixed the Indianapolis Colts when he was supposed to go there, has had his fair share of success in New England. But as a coordinator against the Chargers, historically, he knows how to game plan against that and has done it pretty well with lesser quarterbacks than Derek Carr. Cam Newton being one of them, Mac Jones being another, and they've succeeded. It may not have been the prettiest way to win, but they did it nonetheless.
Yeah. Let's just get into it. All right, so Chargers, Raiders, you want to go offense versus defense on the Chargers side, Chargers offense, Raiders defense, or switch?
Switch. I want to talk about the defense. Probably we can even start with the interior defense of the line, because that is probably the aspect that I am most looking forward to watch with this game. I know everybody would probably immediately go to who's going to cover Devontae, whether JC Jackson is playing or not. That would be the biggest storyline, and I get that because that's going to be huge as it relates to the game.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
But the interior of the defensive line, was really the Achilles heel of this Chargers defense, especially in the run game all throughout last year. And it really showed itself in Week 18 against the Raiders last year. As I had mentioned, Josh Jacobs, over 100 yards, 5.1 yards per carry. That was a dictate point for the Raiders offense as they were matriculating down the field on a number of different drives against this defense. It was a huge part of that final drive that got them into position to kick the game-winning field goal. So the Chargers made it a point to go out and get guys like Sebastian Joseph Day, like Austin Johnson, bringing Morgan Foss possibly on the interior. How have you revamped this up? You now bring Brendan Fehoko into the final 53-man roster to have him hopefully starting in a rotation with these guys. So the emphasis was clearly, the problem was clearly seen. The plan to fix it was clearly done in free agency. But now what's it going to look like when we're starting real games? I want them to be able to take that facet out of this game. And yes, you have Josh Jacobs. Raiders went out and they got Amir Abdullah. Zamir White looks like a pretty impressive young running back coming to that team. So we'll see what he has in store. But I would love for them to be able to make this game a one-dimensional game and put it on Derek Carr's shoulders. Take that facet out that you are not playing, having to worry about the running game just gashing you and just dripping the clock.
Yeah, and if you look at the matchup interior specifically, you've got John Simpson, Andre James, Lester Cotton, that's left guard, center, right guard, going up against Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox / Jerry Tillery, and honestly, you could probably throw in Khalil Mack in there as well. There's no way you can tell me that the Chargers don't have the advantage there. They do. They do. You saw how good that defensive front went up against the Cowboys offensive line, which the Cowboys offensive line is good. You saw that against them in training camp and in preseason. Again, preseason, we didn't really get to see starters. Chargers, I believe, had the advantage there. I don't even think Raiders fans or pundits would say that that's false. Would you agree?
It depends on which Raiders pundits you're talking to, but yes, I would agree.
Okay. So that's on the interior. Edge-wise, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Chris Rumph, sprinkling Kyle Van Noy, Morgan Fox. Again, kind of everyone kind of rotates a little bit. But I would say 85% of the time it's going to be Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. Going up against Colton Miller and Jermaine Illuminor. Alex Leatherwood isn't on the team anymore. How are you feeling?
Part of me kind of misses Alex Leatherwood. I mean, a little bit, I guess. No, you'd still have to feel pretty damn good.
Okay.
Again, this is not Joey Bosa and X player, even though you go back to last year in Week 18, what Uchenna Nwosu did in that final game was damn impressive for what he did some of those like final couple weeks of the season. But in reality, you're now talking about a guy who bookends Joey Bosa and can do it consistently. So what's that going to look like with all the additions that you had just mentioned, Dan, that you put in the interior? I still think the best route to win this, because obviously, are the Raiders going to be ready for that? I'm sure Josh McDaniels has a plan for that. They are going to be chipping those edge blockers to keep them off of Derek Carr for as long as possible. Honest to God, it wouldn't surprise me if this turns into the traditional old school Brady, Edelman, Wes Welker type of game where it's just short dink and dunks, get the ball out of your hand as quickly as possible. So what does that mean? I think, Dan, especially if JC Jackson is out for this game, more emphasis is going to be put on the interior guys to get pressure. So yeah, bookends like Mack and Bosa are going to help that. But in the middle, this is the type of situation that you hoped was going to be prime pickings for Jerry Tillery.
Yep.
And you haven't seen it yet.
Just thinking his name. Yep.
And so you haven't seen it yet.
Morgan Fox, great pass rusher interior. Brandon Fehoko had a great offseason training camp, preseason. Obviously, Austin Johnson, Sebastian Jose, all of those guys, that's what they do. So in theory, you would think that this defensive front from left to right, all the way across, has the advantage against the offensive line for the Raiders. I don't think there's a question. Even if they're chipping, that's one less receiver to cover. So cool, I'll take it. Then you look at the running backs versus, I guess, technically, generally, the linebackers. Kyle Van Noy, Kenneth Murray, Troy Reader, Drew Tranquil. Going up against those guys like you mentioned. You got Josh Jacobs, Zamir White, Brandon Bolden, Amir Abdullah. I honestly think that's a wash. I think that's kind of even. Josh Jacobs, kind of up and down. We know what Brandon Bolden is because they have a ton of stuff out of the backfield. But Kyle Van Noy ain't too shabby. Drew Tranquil and healthy is lethal. We don't know Kenneth Murray, although Ronaldo Hill said today that he has a whole new level of confidence going into the second year in the scheme. And honestly, like Troy Reader, Nick Neiman, both those guys actually look pretty darn good at camp. So I don't think that's like a clear disadvantage.
I don't think it's a clear disadvantage, but don't be surprised, Dan. And again, this is all predicated on what are the Raiders' new guys in the interior going to be able to do. But watch out, because if they are somehow able to find success and open up some holes, don't be surprised if Josh McDaniels leans on the running game more in this one.
I think it'd be smart if they did.
From a personal standpoint for Josh Jacobs, this has nothing to do with the Raiders team. Remember, they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. I think there's actually going to be a chip on his shoulder just from a person, just for his own sake, to say, I deserve a contract, whether it's with the Raiders or not. And it would not surprise me to see him, if holes are open, him running hard. And then Josh Jacobs will say, you know what, Derek, we don't need this right now. Let's go ahead and just keep going with the run game. I would not be surprised by that at all. Like I said, though, it's all predicated on what is the Raiders' interior offensive line going to be able to do. And this is why this is the biggest storyline to me, is our defensive line against their offensive line, because that's really going to this game, no question, like it is with many games, is going to be one in the trenches, and it's going to control so much, whether it's the opposition's running game, how Derek Carr is going to feel comfortable out there, your timing with your receivers. But this is what the Chargers invested in. This is why they went out and they got these guys. So let's see week one, the investment hopefully pay off.
Yep. And I think probably the biggest fireworks, and I think where you're going to see the most talk, is going to be obviously Derek Carr throwing to these guys. Then you've got Darren Waller, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, T. Billy, DJ Turner, Mac Hollins. Versus on the Chargers defense, you've got Derwin James, Nazir Adderley, you've got J.C. Jackson, Asante Samuel Jr., Bryce Callahan, Mike Davis. And there's matchups galore there in terms of like who's going to be matched up with who. We don't know about J.C. Jackson. I would imagine that if J.C. Jackson did go, there's two sides to this. If J.C. Jackson does go, would you be along the side of putting him on Davante Adams, or would you put him on number 2 and then double Davante Adams and let him be on the other side?
I mean, it would probably be a nice mixture of both. But if JC was going to play this game, there's so much more you can do. Just imagine this for a second, Dan. And again, we've talked about this, but now when you actually have a regular game matchup that you know is looking on the other side of the ball from you, if you can put a guy like J.C. Jackson, even if it's for, certain snaps here, not saying every single snap, but a guy who basically is going to follow Davante Adams for a majority of the game, put him on an island, and then you have a chess piece like Derwin James that you can move around the defense, you realize how much possibilities that opens up for your defensive scheme. That's just insane. So obviously, if J.C. Jackson's not going to play, I would still assume that Staley has a contingency plan for that. You'd probably be seeing a lot more double teams geared toward Davante in that circumstance, whether it's a combination of rotation of Mike Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James is probably covering up high just to be safe. How are you going to use Nasir Adderley in that circumstance? What's your defensive deployment going to be in the secondary? How many are you actually going to let loose there? Again, a lot of possibilities, but damn, you would just hope for sure that you would know if JC was going to be playing by this point of the week.
Yeah, if not, if it was me, I think I would be comfortable with having Bryce Callahan on Hunter. I think that's a great matchup. I think both those guys are studs. And then I would think that you can double up on Davante with 2 of the 3, Mike Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., and if I guess we're not doing J.C. Jackson, so Mike Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., and then who's 4? Is that Dean Leonard? Jazeer Taylor. So, and then from there, T. Billy, I would think when he's in, I think honestly Mike Davis is a great matchup with him. Both guys have speed. I think you're covered. Derwin James can kind of be on the inside. You don't want to leave Jazeer Taylor on Darren Waller. Do not do that, please.
No.
Honestly, don't even put Nasir Adderley on Darren Waller. We saw what happened last year.
Well, see, Dan, that's where it's going to be interesting, because you think of the great tight ends that are in this division, Darren Waller being one of them, Travis Kelce being another. You automatically think when Derwin James is on the field that he's going to be all over those guys and just remove them out of the game. But when you have a threat like Davante Adams, you kind of have to be a little bit more careful on how you are going to deploy yourself defensively. So the great thing is the Chargers have Derwin James, the ultimate chess piece. But just how are you going to deploy him and do it properly? You literally have to pick your shots.
So we've gone through kind of like their offense versus the Chargers defense. What do you see as kind of the keys in that matchup? Like if you had to isolate like the 2 or 3 that are most important in this.
It's interior pressure. Dan, we talked about this in the crossover episode. I believe it was the segment that we were speaking to the director about it when we were talking about the edge position. How much better can it make your secondary when you can limit the time for quarterback to throw, receivers to run their routes, a good pass rush from the edge or the interior can actually even indirectly make your secondary better. It just disrupts everything. And unfortunately, the Chargers were not consistent when they came to pass rush last year. Go back to whatever week you want to look at. It was Joey Bosa getting doubled, triple teamed, and the person on the other side, unfortunately, wasn't able to make noise. Hopefully we get a little bit more of that even behind Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa with the likes of Chris Rumph. How are you going to use Kyle Van Noy? I don't fully see him being just deployed in the middle. I think that Staley's going to say, you know what? I'm going to give him a couple shots off the edge like this. And how about this, Dan? As much as we've kind of been treating the Kyle Van Noy situation as almost like, this mystery as far as how Brandon Staley is going to deploy him, we really didn't know. We kind of have a better idea now. But how good is it of a guy like that spent a lot of years on that New England team, and now you have a guy who's going up against an offensive coordinator, now head coach, who he's very familiar with. Obviously, personnel is very different, but scheme-wise, I'm sure he'll be very familiar with. So there'll probably be some things that he'll be able to look at, that he'll be able to get in Brandon Staley's ear about. But Dan, that interior of the defensive line, I would love to see pressure from there. I get what you have in Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. They're going to get theirs. But when you can disrupt the interior of an offensive line and get to the quarterback that way, all bets are off.
When you're hemorrhaging the way that we saw the Chargers' interior defensive line last year did, it's crippling. And that's why I think they were so strategic with bolstering their defensive line, specifically on the inside. Even Khalil Mack is one of the best interior pass rushers as well as run defenders in the NFL as well. So not only is he great on the edge, but he can also go inside, and he's great against the run as well. Sets the edge almost, I think Daniel Jeremiah said it, among the best of all edge players in the NFL. And how hungry is he? Khalil Mack going up against the Raiders. He's on question about how hungry he was training camp. I mean, like, he's ready. So I think you're right. I think for me, if they can stop the run, I think it's a wrap. Quite honestly, if they can stop the run, it's a wrap. Big if. Switch it. Other side. Chargers offense, Raiders defense. This side, unlike the other side we were talking about, there are some mismatches to exploit. I'll put it that way.
There are. You still have one of your own that we're kind of just waiting to see.
Yeah, unanswered questions.
Transpires, yes. But yes, there are mismatches all over the place, specifically in the secondary, that you can exploit. Dan, again, I revert back to a guy that we have not talked about enough in this offseason. Our buddy over at Guilty as Charged podcast, Tyler Schoen, mentioned it on his segment during the crossover as well. Gerald Everett, I think, is going to be more of an X factor than we believe. I would love to see.
I picked him up on my fantasy team.
I would love to see DeAndre Carter continue his impressive preseason camp that he has done and make an impact in this game. I would love to see Josh Palmer's coming out party, if you will, and be in this game for what people have called a potential breakout season for him. We know what the case is going to be with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, established guys. But Gerald Everett, chess pieces galore that you have on the defensive side of the ball. This one with Gerald Everett and with how much he's been talked about, specifically from Coach Lombardi in this offensive scheme, I've been waiting to see how they're going to deploy this. And if you have Donald Parham healthy, like we said, I think that they realize that they missed an opportunity last year when they had Jared Cook and when they had Donald Parham inside the 20s, and I don't think that they exploited those matchups enough times.
Nope.
I think that they will correct that this season with the tight end position, because the mismatches that you can create with Parham and Everett, it's limitless when you add that in the mix to what this wide receiver core is. And I haven't even started talking about Austin Eckler yet.
It's wild. And again, like, there are some advantages that the Raiders have here. You know, obviously Max Crosby, Chandler Jones going up against Trey Pipkins. Like, that's an advantage for the Raiders. Even if Trey Pipkins is improved upon as we thought he would be. Like, that's still Raiders' advantage.
Right. Yes.
Other than that, show me another spot. Rock Ya-Sin, new addition to the Raiders cornerbacks. Nate Hobbs, Amik Robertson, Trevon Merrick. Put them up against Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, Jalen Guyton, DeAndre Carter, and Josh Palmer, with Justin Herbert throwing the ball. Like, I know normally pepper jack, American, but like Swiss cheese all day. I'm taking that 100% of the time for the Chargers. You look at the Chargers running back squad, interior offensive line, Zion Johnson, Corey Linsley, Matt Filer, with an Austin Eckler, and then the running back squad going up against on the interior for the defense for the Raiders. Got Jonathan Hankins, Bilal Nichols, Andrew Billings. Not chump change. Like that interior is
Not chump change.
No, interior is pretty good. But I'll take Zion Johnson, Matt Filer, Corey Lindsley. That trio interior every time. And then you look at like the running backs. So let's just say those are moot. Got Austin Eckler. You've got Sony Michel. Maybe we'll see Isaiah Spiller, Joshua Kelly going up against linebacking core of Denzel Perryman, which we know very well. But then you got Divine Diablo, who wasn't even a linebacker in college. You've got Darian Butler, Jayan Brown. If you want to put in there Luke Masterson, cool. Please put Austin Eckler and Denzel Perryman on an island together out in the flats. Like, I'm just praying for that. Because we've seen, for as good as Denzel Perryman is, one of the things he is not good at is in coverage. And Austin Eckler will exploit the hell out of that.
I'm telling you, man, you go back to last year. If you think about the Raiders defense,
it's so damn frustrating.
But then you think of who the defense was made up with last year. I swear to God, I think there was just like a pact between Denzel Perryman, Brandon Faison, Casey Hayward, to basically, Tyron Johnson, to basically just go out and have the game of their lives to keep the Chargers out of the playoffs last year, because Denzel Perryman and Brandon Faison were 1 and 2 respectfully leaders in their tackles in that game last year. And then Casey Hayward, he was. That's right. But I don't remember him being in on big plays.
No. I'm just saying former Chargers.
Right. But Casey Hayward got an interception in that game on Justin Herbert. We obviously know what Tyron Johnson did. He made a key special teams tackle. Dan, as you mentioned, other than Max Crosby, the only people that were in on a half a sack in that game was Quentin Jefferson and Cleveland Farrell.
Wasn't Darius Philon?
I thought that was the first game that Darius Philon, yes, but to your point, yes, in that particular game, yes, Darius Philon was having himself a damn good game in that game. But it was totally poetic in the worst type of way for the Chargers last year to see those guys go out and literally each one of them contribute into a Chargers loss. Now, you look at that this year, bring in Chandler Jones. I would be interested to know the first defensive scheme and rotation that Josh McDaniels would like to bring out with Max Crosby and Chandler Jones. Because is it going to be a coin flip before the first defensive series for them to say,
I don't want him.
I want Trey Pipkins. I don't want that other guy on the left side of the line. You take him. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. But again, we hope that it's not Max Crosby going up against Storm Norton. That was well documented last year. You hope to see the improvements that we have heard so much about from Duke Manyweather, from this coaching staff, on the progression that Trey Pipkins has made. Zion Johnson obviously has shown what he's made of. That right side, again, you think about it, and again, people kind of forget this. It wasn't just the right tackle position that was debilitating for the Chargers last year. They lost their right guard and they lost their right tackle, essentially, because Brian Bulaka never ended up playing, so it went right to Storm Norton. And then, of course, with everything with Ode Ibushi, it was just a few weeks later that he goes down, and now your whole right side of your line has been reshuffled. And in a sense, it is again, but in a much better way. Much better way. So you would hope to see some progression on that right side of the line from what you have developed from the center position to the left tackle side. So, yeah, Dan, open up holes, give Justin Herbert time, find a way. I would say the exact same game plan that Josh McDaniels could possibly implement against this Chargers defense. Do it against them in the same type of fashion. If you have two edge rushers with Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, I don't need to see 7-step drops all the damn time. I don't need to see it. I know what Justin Herbert can do with the football downfield, but I don't need to see it every snap.
Look, I think like this is a clear mismatch for the Chargers on offense from like a skill position perspective. And it's just mismatch city. Find me a defender on the Raiders that can cover one-on-one Keenan Allen or Mike Williams or Donald Parham or DeAndre Carter. And for that matter, or Josh Palmer. Not one of their secondary, safeties included, can cover any of those guys one-on-one. Well, I mean, sure, could they? Yes. But would I take them over our offensive players? No. I wouldn't. Now, can the Chargers exploit that? Is the key question. Because that is a clear weakness of this Raiders defense. Their secondary is just not good. At best, they're average. You could probably argue Chargers have what, top 5?
I'm not going to go that far until I actually see this unit play as a cohesive unit to say
top
that.
10? Fine. Pick a number. Whatever the number is, it's better than that defense.
Until I see an actual statistical... Hang on. Until I see a statistical improvement, especially on third down, I will reserve my right to say my opinion at this time.
That's bullshit. They had a top 3 they had a top 3 offense last year.
I'm not saying no. Hang on a second. You were just talking about Chargers secondary, arguably a top 5. I'm saying
no. Chargers receiving core.
Receiving core, sure. That's where you confuse.
I'll say our receiving core versus their secondary.
Okay, sorry, that's where I got confused.
Yeah.
Receiving core, sure.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I wasn't going that far about secondary. We don't know it yet.
I won't go top 5 because I didn't even agree with Bucky Brooks saying, that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were the best wide receiving duo in the NFL. That even surprised me.
Bold.
So I won't even go as far as to say top 5 with some of the revamped wide receiver groups, especially when you look out in Tampa Bay, what they did with all the weapons that Tom Brady has. Who knows how that's going to play out? But other teams, Cincinnati's wide receiving core is still pretty damn good, regardless of what you think of their quarterback. But top 10, sure, 100%.
Thank you. So, if you are Joe Lombardi, Brandon Staley, how are you attacking this defense?
Oh, man.
See, you're excited. You're like, ooh, how can I attack this defense? Let me tell you.
Again, I said my piece about Justin Herbert, or excuse me, about Gerald Everett, what needs to be said about that and what I think a huge X factor he's going to play. We haven't even given enough credit to this running game yet. Joe Lombardi has just been saying this week how he has been surprised on how new acquisition Sony Michel has picked up the offense this quickly. It was a great late preseason acquisition for them to land someone like that, especially given the whole situation with Isaiah Spiller. Luckily, it looks like he is getting back to full health very quickly. But just from a standpoint of finding that established guy who can step in and be number 2 right now, as good as Joshua Kelly looked, and some people argued that he earned the position with what he did in the preseason.
Before Sony Michel, yes.
Before Sony Michel, sure. But I feel a hell of a lot more comfortable having someone like that to combine with the likes of Austin Eckler. And then, maybe you sprinkle in Joshua Kelly, Isaiah Spiller here and there. But as a 1-2 punch, that's really good. That's really good, and I like that. And I hate going back to coach's quotes. I'm just trying to make light of this as far as what were the biggest things that were emphasized in season last year, in the offseason, during free agency. I'm telling you, Dan, as much as I would like to see those stats go up for Justin Herbert and a case for him to be made for MVP,
I wouldn't.
If you can make this offense a balanced attack, and as good as Justin Herbert is with the football, I don't want to watch him play catch up all these times.
Mm-hmm. Preach.
Watching him play hero ball is a beautiful thing, but I don't need to see it Sunday to Sunday to Sunday and have my blood pressure going.
It makes fourth in our top 10 plays, but you don't make the playoffs.
Damn sure. Exactly. Those are great on Monday morning, But that's not what you're talking about come football in January. So if you can make this a balanced attack, Dan, if you can implement a running game that can get going, give a compliment to Austin Eckler, as good as Austin Eckler was for you last year. This Chargers offense has the potential to be dangerous if you can go out and execute on a weekly basis.
You heard Brandon Staley all offseason talk about, like, he doesn't like the word talent when people describe his football team.
Neither do we.
They want to be a tough, rugged. They want to dominate the opponents week over week. And again, look, like we've seen this Chargers defense and Chargers offense look very different this year than we've seen in years past. How wonderful and refreshing would it be for Chargers fans for us to sit here and join you and watch the Chargers physically dominate a Raiders team? Like, it's not
you
have
not seen that since the LT days.
And I think that's what they're going for. Like, if we can get Justin Herbert to have very good stats, but no bad stats, but very good stats, and the Chargers can win time of possession, 37 to 23, 35, 25, like, music to my ears.
Dan,
if we get a 15 play drive, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, a couple times.
Dan, I go back to week 1 last year against, at that time, the Washington football team.
Oh, that felt so good.
I was more impressed and had much more confidence in the personnel. Now, again, this was Brian Bulaga's very one short stint that he had at the right tackle position in this offensive line. But at the end of that game, with roughly 6.5 minutes left that was on the clock, and Brandon Staley said, "We are not giving the ball back to you at all." And you ate up that last 6.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get to a point where you can have 1 or 2 drives like that every single game, and how about this? Cash in after a 7-minute drive and put 7 on the box. That's winning football. That's dominating football. That is what is going to tire a defense.
You know what I'm scared of? We talked about the offense and defense going up against each other. Like, Jake, if we have to sit here Sunday afternoon, Monday, and talk about some boneheaded special teams play that cost this team a victory, whether it's
ignore it.
A muffed punt, blocked punt, punt return, kick return given, fumble, whatever. Far too many times have Chargers fans seen special teams cost them victories. And far little have we seen special teams earn us victories.
Sure.
This is like the perfect example of a game where the Chargers can have like the better day in almost every statistical category there is. And then, one muffed punt, game over.
It's usually things like, hell, they had it last year in the final week of the game. They had it last year where it's just like, when was the last time before that happened? Again, I go back to emphasis as far as look at it this way. Regardless of whatever you want to say about Tom Telesco, Brandon Staley, all that stuff. Everything that Dan is mentioning here, every weakness that we have talked about going back to not just the Raiders game from last season, but the season as a whole. In one single offseason, an emphasis was put on to correct that mistake. Special teams being another one. Special teams for the Chargers last year was downright atrocious. Downright atrocious.
But okay, that's a bit of a stretch.
Was it dead last in the league? No. But how many times, Dan, did we have to think about each kickoff? can't put it out in the end zone. Here comes a return, and the opposing offense gets to start with it at least by their 40-yard line.
And it was inopportune, especially week 18. Because
I'm just saying. Yeah. So emphasis again. You go out. Time. You get Ryan Fitkin. Bring him in from the Minnesota Vikings as your new special teams coordinator. Dan, from what you and I have seen, the special teams drills in general have seemed a lot more efficient. Obviously, you look at the second game of the preseason with the Dallas Cowboys, and that just gave you all the bad memories in the world when you see Robert Turpin return not just a kickoff, but a punt return as well. So I'm with you.
New teams, like you said, new long snapper,
yes.
New punter.
Special teams just needs to be sharp. Do not let that be the reason that the Raiders can come back in this game. Something to fire up their team in order to get them motivated, or ultimately cost you the game.
All right, so matchups done. You ready? Week 1.
No, I've actually enjoyed spending the last 207 days not having to talk about this.
207.
Well, technically for the Chargers, it's more like
209.
Maybe 235, something like that. If you go back to football ending for them in December, but yeah, I've kind of enjoyed not having to talk about this segment for this long. It's been a nice, refreshing period.
Okay, well, should we not talk about it?
Well, no, we have to talk about it. But again, we're talking Thursday here. Don't even fully know the final injury report for me to make a damn prediction yet. But Dan, you know what? You're so eager. I know that you're so confident.
Look at you. Look at you.
Do it. So I'm not going to be the ass of the podcast and deprive you of this moment.
Okay.
By all means, take it away.
All right, what segment are we doing?
I thought you were going into predictions.
Yeah, okay. I was making sure we're on the same page.
I'm like, what the fuck are you talking
about? We never actually said what we were talking about.
I thought that was crystal clear.
Yes. Clear as mud. So, predictions. Oh. It's been a long time since anyone has seen this.
Okay, how about this? Let's calm your nerves a little bit, because I could tell you're frustrated. Let's go bold predictions first. How about that? Let's get creative here, Wolkenstein. Let's go bold predictions first. Then we can go into final game predictions. All right. We enjoyed hearing everybody's bold predictions on the crossover podcast last week. But now we're here, week 1, Raiders on the line, bold prediction, go.
130 yards rushing for the Chargers.
Collectively, as a group.
Collectively.
Okay. I like that. That's actually not
130
as
yards
as you may think. Okay. That's not
on defense.
Here it comes.
On defense, we're going to see at least 2 takeaways.
When the Chargers had how many last year?
Not many.
And Mr. INT himself may not even be playing in this game, and you still expect that to happen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I like it. Stand by your bullishness. I like it.
Yes, because, again, Dan Wade talks about it all the time. Closers.
Exactly.
Derwin James. I put Bryce Callahan in that category. I put Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa in that category. J.C. Jackson would be in that category if he was playing. Nazir Adderley is approaching that category if he could actually catch the ball. Kyle Van Noy is in that category. There's a lot of them. And over 80 snaps, can I see them causing 2 turnovers? Absolutely.
Okay. Mine may not seem as outlandish, but I'm going to follow Mr. Kevin Duggan's bold prediction of what he was saying on our crossover episode.
Oh, car insurance.
Because he gave... He said, what was it, 4 sacks? One person said 4. The other person said 5. I couldn't remember who it was.
I think Kevin said 4.
Okay. So I'm going to say there's no way in hell that this Chargers defense doesn't get at least 3. I mean, 3 at the minimum would have to be it, given the status of the Raiders offensive line right now. And whether that's through the interior pressure off the edge, there's no way that I do not see the Chargers not getting at least three sacks in this game. That's on defense. On offense, I think that running back prediction, Dan, is solid. So I'm gonna have to go a different way because I'm not gonna intentionally follow you as much as I would like to see that happen. Justin Herbert, 350 yards, 4 touchdowns.
Ooh, you're going high. Okay, here we go.
350 yards, 4 touchdowns.
Just curious. I know this is going a little far out. Who's the 4?
That's a good question. I'll say Gerald Everett gets 1. Austin Eckler gets 1.
You mentioned that, yeah.
Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer.
Josh Palmer. I think we're going to see something sweet from DeAndre Carter this game. You haven't even talked about it. This entire segment.
I know we're talking about a wide receiver 5, essentially, as it's listed on the depth chart. There's an argument to be had that he could be wide receiver 4 as it stands right now with the way he looked in camp. I hope that they just pick up with him right where they left off in camp and how much on fire he was in practice.
Okay, Jake, ready? We're going to do it a little differently this time. We're doing predictions, but first we're going to say win or loss. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then you got to both say it at the same time. Okay?
Got it.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Chargers versus the Raiders. From a Chargers perspective, 1, 2, 3, win. You didn't do it, damn it! You asshole!
I was delayed, but just know that I said the exact same thing.
Okay, he said win. I love how you were just waiting for me. You're like, I'm going to let them go first.
Yeah.
Okay, so we both have a win. Mm-hmm. Even the shamelessly optimistic Jake Hefner has a win. All right, final score.
I can't start off the new season.
You could.
On a bad foot. I could.
You often
could.
Do.
If we were playing, let's say Tampa Bay, I would probably start off
Kansas City,
I would probably say, especially if it was in Kansas City, which it will be 5 short days later.
I was gonna say.
But I'm just saying that's week 2. This is week 1. So
Preview.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily going to start off on the wrong foot here. So yes,
high score, low score. So you already said 4 touchdowns. So what do you think the final score is going to be?
28-24. Chargers win.
No way this game does not go into the 30s by one team. No way.
I'm with you on that. I would love to see it be, again, a blowout, but I just don't see them separating from each other that much. And I would hope that this defense, even with or without J.C. Jackson, would be much more improved. We'll see. Could it be a shootout, 42 to...
No, 31-27. Take it to the bank. 31-27.
31-27. Okay.
Yep. And the 27 is going to be coming a bit late.
It's going to be one of those freaking nail biters that we despise again, isn't it?
Oh, man. Jake, we made it. Week 1. Chargers versus the Raiders. But before the game, though, Jake, we do have a special guest coming on the show.
Looking forward to this.
Tomorrow. A man who knows a thing or two about these Chargers, calls the plays for them week over week. The man, the myth, the legend, Matt Money Smith joins us on Chargers Unleashed tomorrow. Can't wait for that. He'll give us some preview, some behind-the-scenes looks at the upcoming game, what's like in the booth, what they're prepping for. But until then, Jake, anything else we want to tell the great friends before we get this show on the road? I'm so effing ready for this game right now. I wish it was not Thursday. I wish it was Sunday morning, but it's not. Anything else want to cover?
It's Raider week, man. Football is back. Charger football, more specifically, is back. We've been waiting for too long.
Have you gotten sucked into the banter from Raiders fans?
No.
Smart.
Why would I?
Smart.
Why would I?
You're a smarter man than me.
Look, there are certain people in this world, and this is for all fan bases, including the Chargers, that are the designated shit-talking ambassadors. And I defer to those people. Leave it to them. Leave it to them. That's their job, not mine. That's their job.
Fine. All right. For Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake D. Hefner, myself at Dan W. Sports. Chargers versus Raiders week 1. We finally made it. Before that, hope you enjoyed tonight's game. By the time you probably watch or listen to this, you already saw it. I hope it was fun for you. NFL season kicks off today. Rams versus the Bills. Real quick, Jake, who's winning that one? Who do you have?
Well, I do have Josh Allen on my fantasy squad as my starting quarterback, so I'd have to go with the Bills. Although there's a lot that the Rams are going to be very prideful about, considering the fact that they have had a coach that has never once been under 500. They're going to be, of course, acknowledging their Super Bowl championship tonight. So there's a lot to be playing for, but Josh Allen, man, and the Buffalo Bills, there's a lot of focus on them this season.
Do you remember how their season ended?
I remember how their season started last year. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, I definitely remember how it ended for them, which was just heartbreaking.
Oh.
So
13 seconds, was it?
Yeah, 13 freaking seconds.
It's not just us, Chargers fans, Chargers pundits. It's not just us. It happens to every team. I got the Bills winning tonight. Bills Mafia taking over LA for that one. For Jake Hefner, Dan Wolkenstein, LAFB, Chargers Unleashed. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you tomorrow with Matt Money Smith, talking all things Raiders preview as we get going for week 1 versus the Raiders. We'll talk to you soon.